chord, or you can play octaves from each other to widen out the chord. So the 8-string guitar has kind of bass-like properties in it, where what's happening is, because it's a baritone, okay, you're getting a heavier, every note, every chord is going to be heavier sounding because of the longer scale length, right? So if you have one guitar with a regular scale length doing the leads, the main power riffs, that will just, because guitars typically sonically cover the mid-range predominantly, but they cover a little bit of the lows, a lot of the highs. Where when you have a longer scale length, you lose out on some of the highs. And then when you go to the bass, you're pretty much, everything's in the, from the mid to the low, right? So I guess for somebody who's going to be multi-instrumentalist or whatever, what they need to consider for the bass, whether they're just going to go for the 4-string, is how low do they want to go? Like, how heavy do you want that chord on the guitar to sound? And if you're going to be doing like a triple threat, a regular 25.5 scale or 24 3/4 scale, doing one part and the other part of the rhythm done on that, well, now you got even more sonically lower, because once you start adding distortion, that's where the 8-string can get a bit muddy or whatever if it's not the proper scaling. Now, multi-scale would probably fix that problem, and that would land you kind of more into the bass territory for the low end punch, right? Baritone guitars deliver a lot of punch, especially live. But the thing is now you're giving a little bit, your 8-string guitar or 7-string guitar is going to now give your bass a little more freedom to go somewhere else. So because you've got your high from your regular guitar, your mids and low end here, and then as much low end as you want there. So you can even bring the bass into the high mids and have 3 layers basically of the same chord cutting through 3 different ways. So even though the bass is kind of in the background, it's still out front. So it's like, I'll give you an example. If you want to go listen to a really cool, even if you're not into speed metal or whatever, there's a band called Frozen Crown. They have a song called Far Beyond. And if you listen, it's probably one of the most, it's a speed metal song. So it's, when I say melody, I'm not talking, like ballad. I'm talking, it's very melodic. It's probably one of the most melodically driven metal songs I've ever heard. Which is a bold statement. I get that. But when you listen, like, everything is just, like, it's just, if it would be like if Mozart wrote it, right? But what makes it really punch out, like, you have these harmonizing flying V guitars, which is really cool, right? And you got power riffs in behind that, right? Makes it even cooler. And then you've got the vocals and whatever, and you got this thunderous, machine gunning drumming going on, double bass pedal just going nuts, right? But then you got the bass bringing the thunder. And the funny part about the bass player, he's good enough that you don't notice it, but then if you listen, there's the bass. So he knows how to be, he knows where to be in the song to really give that bass the lift to the song, right? So that these 2 other guitars can do their high speed, extremely articulating notes of, really fast thrash metal kind of speed metal notes. And then of course you got the guitar harmonies, which cover the high end. So you've got the highs, the mids, the low mids, and then you've got the thunder at the bottom. And that is something that a lot of guitar players do not understand, is how important the bass is to your guitar. So the dynamic between the guitar players and the bass player is, very, very unique, but it's also the dynamic between most people associate the bass with the drums, which, again, this is the job of the bass players, to understand where to be with the drums, while giving room to the guitars to do their cut through mid-range, top end, or whatever, but yet make them sound thunderous and powerful while not overpowering or muddying up the drums. So that is a really tricky, tall order for a bass player, and a lot of bass players don't understand that either. So you'll have a bass player that's really, really good. Like, if you want to see a really cool bass player, guitar player dynamic, Billy Sheehan and then Paul Gilbert. Like, I mean, these guys know how to work together. And considering they're only a four-piece band, they sound much bigger than a four-piece band when you listen to them. But the thing is that they're only a four-piece band because Billy Sheehan knows how to play the bass to give you one note or give you widen out the song, right? And what I mean by widen out the song is like playing from like one note, or playing it in a chord, or playing it, in an octave, octaves or whatever, and knowing when to use that. If you look at Michael Anthony from Van Halen, he's always been really, playing with a pick pretty much, and sometimes with the fingers too, obviously. But he's mostly been a one note kind of bass player, do 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 do, whatever, and very solid. But he always knows where to put it so that it would give Eddie Van Halen, all his rocketing Eddie Van Halen chops would be well backed, so it wouldn't sound thin. Because if you were to play it, yourself as a guitar player when you play Eddie Van Halen riffs with no drums there, no guitar, backing guitar or whatever, you could see how many holes there's there and how easy it could fall apart. So if you're playing live, your bass player has to come up with the guitar part that's not there. You know what I mean? And I think a good discussion, from bass to, 8-string guitar, to 6-string guitar, whatever, scale lengths. When I hear people say that, it doesn't really matter what guitar you have to record with. Anything will do, as long as it's good quality, right? Or it doesn't really matter if you have a 4-string or a 6-string bass. I believe it does make a huge difference because of where it sonically lands. So the 4-string bass is really cool. Don't get me wrong. It's easier to play, whatever, but the 4-string bass never gets to the thunder of the 5 or the 6-string. And the 5-string bass never gets to the highs of the 6-string bass. And the 8-string guitar is not a bass. So a lot of guys think that they're doubling up on the bass. You always have the, 8-string guitar. We don't want an 8-string guitar in the band because we already got a bass player, right? But it's not. This is a thinner sound than the bass, right? So the thing is that for the bass and the 8-string guitar to work well together, this is where I think it's even harder for a bass player to work with probably an 8-string than it is to work with a regular 6-string, because of that scale length, putting the bass, more bassiness into the 8-string, which could, accidentally muddy up your song and make it harder for your bass player. So your bass player, while you're down, like I say, on a low power chord somewhere, just cranking away, maybe what happens for the bass is he has to go high when you go low, and vice versa, just so that you can distinguish each other. If not, you just got this big puddle of dark, oozing power mud, right? So something that I thought would be interesting for a video topic, and something that I, probably should spend more time discussing relation. Like, I don't have a drum kit here to even discuss that, but I want to start doing more bass stuff, but I don't have a bass amp or anything like that. But I do want to start talking more about the bass and stuff like that. And I'm getting better with, like I'm out of practice although I've been able to play bass for years, but like to go from the low B to the G and like string skip with my fingers and stuff, I'm still a little bit sloppy, but I predominantly practice fingers, 2-finger, 3-finger, whatever. Slapping and popping, I'm not bad. Like, I could do a little bit of funkiness, but you would never call me a dedicated bass player. But I know enough about the instrument to know what I don't know. And I'm still learning with the 8-string where I can put that in the song. So when I bought the 8-string, I was thinking more of rhythm guitar, right? But I also understand that if you're doing really fast solos, I want like this guitar here, my Holcomb guitar, or maybe the SGs in the back, or definitely the Flying Vs. I don't know if you see all that. Those are the guitars I want for the flashy, fast, arpeggiated solos or whatever, right? I mean, for example, doing arpeggios on a bass, not easy. Not easy. Doable, but not easy. But where do you use it? Like, that's always the question, where to use it. Now, on the 8-string, if you're playing a really slow melodic solo, because the notes just kind of come out to you thicker because of the longer scale length, I find the 8-string in my awesome 7-string somewhere back there are really good for the slow solos, because it's such a thicker note. like it's not as much about the mid range, more about the melody, right? So when you're listening to songs, listen for the relationship between the bass and the guitar. Also, the bass and the drums. Because like a really good bass player sometimes will go off beat to the drummer, and that widens out the drums. But it doesn't cover the sonic range where the drums are and become mud. So if you were listening to a song and everybody's playing the same note, so you got say an 8 string, a 6 string, and your 5 string or 4 string bass or whatever, and everybody's just playing on the beat, yeah, you'll get a really stomping sound, right? But if that bass, does double time to it'll allow the drums to kind of come out, especially when you're talking fast stuff like double bass drum, whatever. I've never really worked with a really good double bass drummer player. One drummer I had, he had a double bass, but he didn't use it enough to get really, really thunderous with it. But I did work with a bass player that did do a lot of work with guys like that. And he was telling me about that. He's like, you got to land your note on, maybe not the first note, but maybe on the third note or something like that to give it like a really unusual sound, like a that kind of thing, right? And I didn't get it at the time what he was telling me, what he was trying to convey to me, but I get it now. So like he was like counting, he was like missing a count to land 2 other counts, which cleared up the drum so you'd hear the thunder coming from the double bass, and then it made him sound faster. It